Hi, welcome to the Canadian Rockies on this beautiful spring morning. Today we're going to be talking about landscape photography, and we're going to be starting off here in the beautiful town of Canmore on the edge of the Rockies. So join me and Rachel as we talk about landscape photography. We're going to start off by looking at two important accessories for landscape photography. First of all, when we're doing landscape photography, having a strong solid support for our camera is important, and they range a lot from something like this simple gorilla pod, which are small, lightweight, and they come in a variety of sizes for different sizes of camera.
Okay.
They have many advantages, mainly the size of them, and the disadvantage of them is that we simply can't get the camera far enough off the ground. So that's important, like it is today, then a full-size tripod is the way to go. Now the other accessory that I use a lot for my landscape photography is a polarizing filter. So this is a polarizing filter.
So what would a polarizing filter do?
Okay, what a polarizing filter does is it can help to make blue skies really dark and stand out. That's a big advantage usually. It can also reduce glare, and that's significantly useful with water. So today we've got bright water, and that can cause a problem with the exposure. So having a polarizing filter can really calm that exposure down of the water. And thirdly, if you're trying to get a slow shutter speed and trying to get that silky look to water, then because the polarizing filter blocks light, then it means that you're going to get a slower shutter speed by using this.
Okay. So how do we use a polarizing filter, Richard?
Okay, good question. The way that I use it is, before I put the filter on the camera, I want to make sure that we need the filter. There's no point putting it on there if it's not going to cause much of a... There's no point putting it on there if the effect is going to be negligible.
Right.
So what I do is make sure that the thread part of the polarizing filter is facing you,
Okay.
and then hold it up to your eye and then turn the filter. And what we're seeing today is a very large difference in the blue sky. So as you turn the filter, you'll suddenly see the blue sky go a lot darker. And if you look at it at the water, as you turn it, the glare goes down and the rocks become more apparent and they look browner. So there's quite a big difference. But remember, you get this big difference at 90 degrees from the sun. So the sun at the moment is down here, so we're going to get the greatest effect in this direction and in this direction.
Okay.
So if you give me your camera, why don't you have a go and see what the difference is.
You just turn it a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Definitely can see a difference making use of that. Great.
Okay. Now some compact cameras do not have a thread on them, so it makes it harder to use with a compact camera. However, all is not lost. You can either buy an adapter for the end of your compact camera, or what I simply do is I take my small polarizing filter, this one, when I'm using my compact camera, and I simply turn it just as we've just shown, and then I just hold it right in front of the lens of the compact, and that works fine as well. So you can use these with compact cameras.
And would you recommend it with a compact camera?
Yeah, exactly for the same reasons as we're using today, yeah.
Great.
So another option, Rachel, with polarizing filters is to use one that works with the Kokin filter holder system.
Okay.
Now tomorrow when we go to Yamnuska and we do some photography there, we're going to be using filters called graduated neutral density filters, and these will fit inside this filter holder. So the idea of the polarizing filter that fits in this holder is that we can use all these filters together and without getting things too complicated.
Great.
So with these filters, they simply fit inside this filter holder like this, and you have an adapter ring for your lens. So this is a 52mm adapter ring,
Okay.
and this would go onto the end of this lens like so, and then we can just put that on the outside.
Oh, neat.
Okay, so that's how. So all we need to do with this system is buy different adapter rings for each lens that you've got.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Now if you do use this system for your polarizing needs, then what I recommend you do is first of all to look through the filter before you put it in the filter holder.
Okay. So why is that?
So that's a good question, Rachel. The reason is that these can be quite difficult to turn once they're in the filter holder.
Okay.
So what I do is I just look through the filter and position it like this, and then I can keep my finger on the top, I drop it into the filter holder, and then I push it up from the bottom like that.
Got it. Okay.
So it's all ready to go. So I find that's the best way to do it. Now, the adapter ring can make the filter holder quite stiff, so trying to put the polarizing filter into the filter holder whilst it's on the adapter ring can be quite difficult as well. So I always take the filter holder off the adapter ring and then take the filter out of the filter holder like this.
Okay.
Otherwise this gets too stiff and it's really difficult to do, especially when you're wearing gloves.
Right.
Okay.
So Richard, I've always loved that silky look to water in photographs. How would I achieve that?
Okay, Rachel, so that's done by having a slow shutter speed on your camera.
Okay.
So the first thing you want to do to get a slow shutter speed is to make sure that the ISO on your camera is low.
Okay.
So around about 100 ISO would be a good start point. And then secondly, you want to aim for a shutter speed of about a 30th of a second. It's hard to give you a definite number because it really depends on the speed of the water. As you can see, the Bow River at the moment is not going as fast as it does in the summertime, so we might need to have a shutter speed close to a second today.
Okay.
But in the summertime, when there's a lot more flow and it's a lot faster, then it would be maybe a 30th of a second to give you the same kind of result. And then to get that slow shutter speed, you'd have to choose a small aperture. Now the problem with compact cameras is that they don't have much of an aperture range, and the smallest aperture of most compact cameras is only f8. So that can cause you a problem. On a bright sunny day like today, we simply don't get the slow shutter speed. So you have a couple of solutions. One is to put a polarizing filter in front, and hopefully that will reduce the shutter speed enough.
Okay.
And if that doesn't work, then another accessory you can use is called a neutral density filter. This is a solid filter and it's simply dark in colour and it blocks the light. So the neutral density filter, as you can see, is very dark, and it simply just reduces the light before it enters the lens.
Okay.
Now there's two types of these available. This square one fits in the coking filter holder that we looked at earlier, or you can get circular ones that simply screw onto the end of the lens like the polarizing filter. But the neutral density filter doesn't have to be turned, it just sits there and blocks light.
How would you use it with a compact camera?
Okay, that's a good question, and what we'd do is we just get mine out. You would simply take the lens cap off and you just hold it in front of the lens. So without the neutral density filter and at f8,
Right.
my shutter speed is 1/25th of a second, and then now with the filter on it's right down to a 30th of a second.
Oh wow.
So we've got that nice slow shutter speed just by putting this filter in front.
Great.
Now when you're doing the slow shutter speed for the moving water, then you want to have the camera supported, because if you don't, with that slow shutter speed, any kind of movement in your hands is going to mean that the entire photograph will be blurry. So this is where a tripod is going to come in really useful. So let's take a picture now with my camera and we'll look at the difference between using a fast shutter speed and a slow shutter speed.
Great.
So I started off by composing the photograph, and I've got some nice fast moving water at the far end of the river. First thing I'm going to do is to reduce the ISO of the camera. So this camera will go down to 50 ISO, and what that does is it's essentially making the camera less sensitive to light and giving us the slower shutter speed.
So I'm assuming you'd use shutter priority mode.
Okay, so that's a good question. Yes, you could use shutter priority mode and then just select the 30th of a second that we discussed for the shutter speed, or you could use aperture priority mode and change the aperture until you saw a 30th of a second in the viewfinder. Now I'm currently in aperture priority mode, so I'm going to look through the viewfinder now. And I've got 160th of a second at f8, so that's too fast to get silky water in this particular river because it's not going that fast. But let's take a picture anyway, and then we can see the difference between this fast shutter speed and a slow shutter speed. So now to get the slow shutter speed, we've got one of two choices. We could put the neutral density filter in front of the lens, or we could just choose a smaller aperture that would let less light in through the lens and give us a slower shutter speed. So I'll do the aperture one first. And you can hear the shutter speeds quite a bit slower. Now with these slow shutter speeds, I would recommend that you actually use either a remote cable or the self timer, so that you don't disturb the camera when you press the shutter release button. Sometimes, Rachel, you don't want to use a really small aperture. Maybe you don't want to have a huge depth of field, and if you're making a really big print, then very small apertures can actually cause the photograph to look a bit blurrier than it would have been. So one of the best ways to get the slow shutter speed, as we mentioned before with the compact camera, is to use the neutral density filter. So I've already put a adapter ring on my lens, so I'm just going to get out a coke-in filter holder, and I've already put a polarizing filter on the front of this. So the combination of the polarizing filter, which is going to help get our nice blue sky, reduce the glare on the water, that will give us a slower shutter speed, and then the neutral density filter will give us a really slow shutter speed. So let's try that. It's going to be like a professional in one go. So let's do a photograph first of all with just the polarizing filter. So there's 100th of a second, and now we'll put this in. And because the camera's in aperture priority mode, then we've blocked the light coming through the filter, and it's going to give us a much slower shutter speed. So I've not changed any settings at all. So I find aperture priority mode is quite a fast mode to use.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Not yet.
Okay.
I think you've covered everything. So Richard, what could I do to improve my composition?
Let me have a look. So that's a good shot to start off with. One thing we can do though is to use the lines in the foreground to our advantage to give us some depth.
Okay.
If you have a look at the scene, the lines on the other side of the river bank, is quite parallel to where we are. But if we move down the river slightly, then there's some foreground elements that we can use to give us more depth and more interest to the picture.
Okay.
So let's go down the river and take a look.
Sounds good.
Okay, Rachel, we've walked a short distance down the river, and now in this location you can see we've got this gravel bank in the middle, and also the river bank on the far side is at a slight angle towards us, so that's giving us more depth, which we can see just by looking at the scene. So try the photograph again and see what you get.
Have a look at that.
Yeah, it's great. Now one other thing you can try is that if you get down a bit lower, then the water will look as though it's coming straight at you, and you can get another feeling from that picture too.
Okay.
So why don't you try kneeling down, that's great. And then similar photograph. Yeah, that looks great. So we'll finish off, we'll combine the slow shutter speed with a polarizing filter and the low position, and you should get a really nice photograph with the dramatic blue sky and the silky water.
Great. Okay. So Richard, hulling looks so dramatic as we stand here today, but when I look at my picture, it doesn't look dramatic at all. How can I improve upon that?
Okay, Rachel, the reason is that hulling is a nice big vertical peak, and we've got these great trees in the foreground, and you've chosen to take a horizontal photograph. So to get hulling to fit, you've had to zoom out quite a bit. With a peak of this kind of shape, and especially with these trees, I would recommend taking the photograph vertically, and you'll be able to zoom in a lot tighter, and it will look a whole lot more dramatic.
Okay.
So why don't you try that?
Ah yeah, definitely improved.
Yeah, great.